Thank you, Elizabeth. You're kind. I appreciate that. I'm going to take you back to 1975. And it's not lost on me that some people in this room were not born then, but I'm not looking for a show of hands. Thank you, Marlise. I'm not looking for a show of hands, and that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is in 1975, I was a sophomore in high school in Conroe High School, just up the road. And I walked into the McDonald's in Conroe during the summer of 1975, and there was a girl working behind the counter that I thought was gorgeous. And I'd never seen her before, and I was born and raised in Conroe. I thought I knew everybody. And I walked into the McDonald's, and there was a girl there with beautiful eyes and a great smile and one of those paper hats that you used to have to wear. So that was in 1975. In September, 2 months ago, I spent 2 weeks in Italy with that girl. But what happened in between may not be what you think. It was 47 years, and it was not an easy road, it was not a straight road, and it was not a downhill road. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Before we get into my story, let me first recognize our veterans. If you're a veteran in the room, would you please stand or raise your hand? Stand or raise your hand, veterans. Let's give all the veterans a round of applause, please. Thank you for your service. We mean it from our hearts. So before I get into some stories for you, I will tell you that I have spoke at Inspired Leaders before. And Andy and I talked about this, and we actually have a little bit of an argument as to exactly how many people were there, because I think it was 7. Andy thinks it was 10. It's not a very big argument. It was, granted, in the middle of COVID. It was in August of 2020. But I also think that Andy just told me over here, I might actually have the distinction of having the smallest crowd ever and the largest crowd ever at Inspired Leaders. So thank you all for coming out today. I appreciate you being here. So Andy and Elizabeth encouraged their speakers to talk about their personal challenges. And they want to hear personal stories, and the website talks about grit and passion. And I don't really like talking about myself. I would much rather talk about leadership concepts or business concepts or causes that I believe in and that I am passionate about. So what you're probably going to get today is a little bit of all of that, because I'll tell a little bit of my life story, but I will dribble in there the things that I think have made me who I am and how we got here. I don't want to just ramble with stories, and I will drop my notes. So I want to focus on 4 things that are going to tie these stories together. And I don't know what you really call these things. To me, they are foundations that I try to build my life around, and try is a very key word. But the first one is to be humble. And don't take yourself so seriously. Most of us in this room aren't as important as we may think we are. And not only are we not, and most people don't care as much about us as we think they do. And we get all worried about what people think, and they really probably aren't thinking anything. So be humble. It's key, I think. Have perspective. A lot of my stories we'll talk about briefly have given me perspective. But I think that a lot of life is, so I was on Andy's podcast several years ago, and Andy asked me what my definition of success is. So to me, success isn't about a title or owning a business or running a business or having X amount of money or living in X kind of a house. I believe that you have to create your own definition of success. And to me, a lot of definition of success is being comfortable in who I am and where I am. And if we can accomplish that, then we've accomplished something. And, it's different. Being comfortable does not necessarily, and even being contented That does not mean that we need to be lackadaisical or not grow, because my next comment is always be growing. Always look for ways to grow. Yourself, those around you, encourage people, encourage yourself, push yourself. You're going to hear some growth stories today. And then the last of the 4 things is invest, and I call it invest times 3, because I really believe that people should invest, 1, in themselves, 2, in relationships or in others, and 3, in your community. And you're going to hear some stories about those 3 things. So those are the 4 things. Be humble, have perspective, always grow, and invest. And there's an underlying theme of faith among that too. And to me, that's foundational below all of those. And you'll hear me talk about that a little bit too. So what happened after I met that girl at the McDonald's? Well, that's a good story. As it turns out, she had just moved there that summer. She thought she would take a job at a McDonald's because she didn't think anybody would hang out there, and she didn't know that was the only place to hang out in Conroe. But it turns out we went to the same church, and I knew some of her family that she moved there to join, and we ended up dating in our junior year in high school. And we didn't exactly have a smooth dating relationship. I can remember getting an argument. And by the way, I'm speaking of my wife, Fran Blanton. I'll tell you how we got to where we are. But I can remember one time we got into an argument, and she told me, she goes, "You are so stoic." I got in the car and drove home as fast as I could to look up what the word stoic meant. No clue. So, fast forward, we actually went to the junior prom together. And we were still dating when we started our senior year. And now we're going to get to tying back to some of the 4 things that I talked about. But I was the student body president when I was senior in high school. In the very first football game, Fran and I go to the football game, but I had been invited to go up to the press box to say the prayer at the beginning of the game. Well, I thought I was a pretty big deal, and so I just stayed up there. We didn't date much after that. I mean, I did come back down, but I think it was the 3rd quarter before I came back down. Fran's version of that story is got a little more color to it, probably, but we literally did not date the rest of our senior year, and our lives went different directions for 20 years. So this is not a high school, we dated in high school and have been together forever, because that's not what happened. So we'll get back to that story in a minute. I went to college at UT. She went to A&M. That was part of the problem, but right, Adam? So anyway, our lives went different directions. I graduated and got married soon after I graduated and took a job back in my hometown. Went to work at a bank in Conroe, Texas. Got married, had 2 great kids, was raising kids in Conroe, moved to the Woodlands in 1990, thought I would be a banker forever. That was the career I chose, and I thought I would stay there. And part of this story today is things don't go the way that you plan. And one of those things that doesn't go the way that you plan was I ended up going through a divorce. We had relatively young kids at the time, but went through a divorce. And we did that as amicably as possible for our kids. We both still live in the Woodlands and still do today. But not long after that, I ran into Fran's uncle in the grocery store. And he's like, "Hey, Barry, did you know Fran got a divorce?" And I'm like, "No. Hey, Freddie, did you know I got a divorce?" And so literally, she was living in Jacksonville, Florida at the time. And so there wasn't like, I couldn't call her and take her to lunch. So she was living in Jacksonville, Florida. So we started talking on the phone and kind of phone dating, if you will. One thing led to another, and without dragging that story out too long, we have now been happily married for 23 years. But if you want to talk about a life challenge, talk about a blended family with teenagers. And that'll go back to some of those foundational things, faith being one of them, because you got to be strong there to get through that. That was part of what we lived through. But I didn't learn that lesson from thinking I was something special and staying in the press box too long. That didn't sink in early enough. Probably made that mistake up into my 30s. I had a president of a bank tell me one time, I was sitting in a loan committee meeting, and an associate of mine got to bring a large credit to the committee that I thought I had worked on, and I thought I had the right to have been the one to take it to committee. Again, I'm thinking of what a big deal I am. And the president of this bank proceeded to tell me that I looked like a toad sitting in the corner that was all puffed up and red-faced because I was mad. So he put me in my place. Maybe that helped me learn that lesson a little bit. I don't know. So not long after Fran and I got married, and you're gonna hear a little bit of a theme in some of my story, but our family has been significantly impacted by cancer. And the first time that happened was with me. In 2003, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was not life-threatening at the time, but it's not considered curable. It tends to come back and could still, although I'm many, many years into no evidence of disease. But you talk about a faith opportunity. Cancer is something that you can't do anything about and don't have control over, and you really have to learn to let go of some things. And so that was a unique opportunity for me. And unfortunately, the cancer theme in our life goes on. My dad died of leukemia in 2007, just a couple of years after I went into remission. They are both blood cancers. There is no evidence to think that they are tied together or that it's genetic. But one of the things that I've done out of that and some other friends and family and cancer relationships or cancer challenges is I've been involved with Light the Night in the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society here in the Woodlands. Many of you all have supported us. We've got a team called the Blanton Bunch, and we've been raising money for 18 years. And over the course of 18 years, and I've got these numbers here, I want to make sure that I get them right. Over the course of 18 years, we've raised $480,000. We raised $57,000 this past weekend. And the event in the Woodlands, which I helped bring here along with Julie Peters, Julie Peters was involved when we first got Light the Night brought to the Woodlands. We've raised $11 million over 18 years for blood cancer research. So one of the things that I think is important for us to do, and I think that giving back to our community, investing in our community is so important. And people oftentimes ask me, how do you get involved, or what should I get involved in? And I think that's a very personal question. Even if you think you're doing it for networking reasons, my suggestion is don't go into it looking at it like that. Find something that you're passionate about. Find something you have a tie to. Find something that you care about or something that stirs your belly and get involved in it. Relationships will follow. Business will follow. But find something that you care about. We have a personal tie to blood cancer, and we've been supporting that for a long time. Fortunately, a lot of work that the LLS does for blood cancers impacts other kind of cancer research. See, y'all, now I'm off on, you can tell why I don't like to talk about myself. I'd much rather talk about things like this. But a lot of kinds of cancers, other kinds of cancers benefit from research that are done on blood cancer because how cells replicate in blood is so critical to how cancer grows and moves through our body. So we've supported that organization for a long time, and as it turns out, we have future reasons to do that. My mother-in-law passed away just 1 year after my dad. So my wife and I both lost a parent within a year, and that was something to deal with. It was a challenge, and in some ways it still is. She had breast cancer, and we walk in memory of her as well, even though it wasn't a blood cancer. So I'll get off the cancer thing for a minute, although it won't go away from my story. But I said I was a banker, and I thought I was going to be a banker forever. Well, of all things. So here's a funny story I just remembered. Literally. My very first job at that bank in Conroe, I was a credit trainee. And one of the things that we used to do, and this is, I think, still done to some degree, although a whole lot of it is automated, but banks used to do what they call floor plan lending, and that's to car dealerships and things like that. And they would the credit trainees, would have to go to the car lots and count the inventory at the end of the month. Well, I found myself also doing that for a mobile home dealer. Going out and reading serial numbers off the tongue of mobile homes and counting inventory. Little did I know that, I don't know how many years later, 15 years later, 20 years later, I went to work for a company called Fleetwood, and I found myself in the manufactured housing business. So a strange turn that I did not expect. I spent almost 10 years in the manufactured housing business working for Fleetwood, and we bought up dealerships across the country. This was one of those things that I thought was going to be a home run. We were going to take this, we created a subsidiary of Fleetwood. We were going to roll it. It was going to be a roll-up. Everybody was going to hit a home run, make a bunch of money, go public. That never happened. Again, those plans that we make and God laughs, it never happened. Fleetwood's bankrupt, doesn't even exist anymore. I left that company some time ago and became a CFO for a local independent company. And while I was working for that company is while my dad died, when my dad died, and when I went through cancer, I was still with Fleetwood. My dad died while I was with House of Forgings. But while I worked for there, at the age of 48, I started running. And I had never been marginally active, and I wouldn't even use the word athletic, but I did start running, and it became a passion. Unfortunately, I'm not doing much of it anymore, but for several years, I ran a lot, and it became a healthy lifestyle for me. I did 2 full marathons and like 30 half marathons. So if you think you can't do something, I was 48 when I started that. So don't think you can't do something just because you haven't ever done it before. There's a lot of people in this room that know some of my running stories and some that have run with us before. And then life can throw you a curveball and hit you in the face really hard. We have an adult son who passed away 3 years ago. And Jason battled mental illness and drug abuse. He was diabetic. He lived in and out of our home for a long time, in and out of group homes and sober homes and every other place that we could try for 6 or 7 years, till he chose on his own to move to California, where he lived the last 5 years of his life basically homeless. So in 2019, we lost an adult son who had struggled with mental illness, obviously, for a long time. And that haunts us to this day, haunts my wife more than me probably. And that's something that we're still working with. The problem with that is we didn't have a whole lot of time to deal with that. On the heels of that, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. So in August of 2019, Fran was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it wasn't the easy kind to deal with, and there aren't any good kinds. I don't mean that way. But she struggled through that, and she's doing fine now. She's in remission. She's got a few issues that still follow her around, but she got through that, and so that's way too many people in my immediate family that have been impacted by cancers. So you can understand our passion for trying to raise money for cancer research. So along in that story, and I just realized something today when I was putting together these notes. After the House of Forgings, where I was the CFO, in the 08 and 09 crash, that company became a much smaller company and didn't really need me anymore, and I wasn't a good fit with the new owners. So I started my own business. 12 years ago. We're a sponsor. Jeff's our regular attendee here. Jeff announced our sponsorship a few minutes ago. Blanton Advisors is a CFO consulting business here in the Woodlands. But I realized when I wrote these notes that my dad never saw my business. I literally didn't realize that. He doesn't know what I've accomplished as a business owner. True, he does. He can't tell me. But anyway, so that just occurred to me today. So you talk about, I was going to be a banker forever. And then I found myself selling mobile homes. Now I own my own business for 12 years. And it's, there's no such thing as an overnight success. We're doing real well right now, but it took 12 years of hard work to get there. So what do you do with these things? I've mentioned a few things. Those are some of my life stories. But I mentioned a few things already that I've taken out of this. For instance, I write a leadership blog called the Monday Morning Minute. Many of you may be familiar with it. You can find it on Facebook and LinkedIn. But the Monday Morning Minute was born at Fleetwood when we were going through some really tough times, and I wanted a way to communicate and try to be encouraging to our team. And then when we shut Fleetwood down and people started leaving, they wanted to stay on the distribution list and keep doing it. So I've literally, I don't know how long I've been, 16, 17 years I've been writing the Monday Morning Minute. So that's a way that I want to encourage and grow others by continuing to do that. That's one example. We started, in addition to Light the Night and what we do for Light the Night, we started an event in partnership with Melissa Young and her husband Jeff. Fran and I host something called Corks for a Cure. I need to meet the girl in the back that drinks wine, because so do I. I've been known to do a little bit of that myself. So much so that we created a fundraiser around it. So that's a good thing. Started a running club. We've had a running club here in the Woodlands called Red X Running for a long time. I'm a part owner of a business that is a bookkeeping business here in the Woodlands also. So, and I've served on a lot of boards. I've been the chairman of the board of the both YMCAs in Montgomery County and Leadership Montgomery County and the United Way of Montgomery County when it was separate. I'm not trying to tell you those things about me for braggadocious reasons. I think that what we all need to understand from our life stories is they make us who we are. They give us experience that is most of the time worth sharing with other people. Investing in other people, investing in relationships, and investing in community. You may not think that you are designed to do that. I believe that we all are in some way or another. In our own home, in our own church, in our own community. Doesn't mean you have to stand up here in front of a group and speak. It doesn't mean that you have to be the chairman of a board. But it does mean that you've got stories that others can benefit from. And your stories are going to be different from my stories, and they're going to be different from the person that's sitting next to you. But they're all stories, and they're all lessons. And what we do, if we let those stories go and we don't do anything with the lessons that we've learned, what are we really doing? If we don't grow from the lessons and share those lessons, what are we really doing with our lives? And so I think it's just from an inspired leader standpoint and personal stories, I feel like we have at least a little bit of an obligation to share some of our stories and our lessons. Everybody's are different, and how you choose to share that and what you choose to do with it is your own. That's your own work and your own piece. I've given you some examples of kind of what we've chosen to do or what I've chosen to do. So a couple of other things real quick. I see some people do this from time to time, talk about what am I reading. It just so happens that I've got two pieces of nonfiction up here. 9 times out of 10, I would have a James Patterson or a David Baldacci book up here, not nonfiction, but I'm trying to be intelligent. I graduated from Conroe with a girl named Annette Gordon Reed, who is actually a Pulitzer Prize winner. And she recently had a new elementary school in Conroe Independent School District named after her. And this book is called, she's a Harvard professor. Her husband's a judge in New York. I mean, she is a phenomenal story. But this little book is called On Juneteenth. And it is about her growing up as a young black person in Conroe, Texas in the 70s and even 60s. And it is a powerful perspective on racism, the history of slavery in our state, and some things like that. And it's a very short read, and it's a really good read. And she's not negative about where she grew up. She's very proud of where she grew up. But she's telling stories in here I never knew anything about. Of course, I was a privileged white kid there, and she and I were on yearbook staff together. We were good friends. But there's some cool stuff in this book. It's called On Juneteenth by Annette Gordon Reed. And the other thing that I'm reading right now, and many of you may know something about this, I don't know, how many of you know Patrick Lencioni, are familiar with any of his work? Patrick Lencioni is, well, he wrote, what is it? The 5 Dysfunctions of the Team is probably the most famous one. Death by Meeting is another one. He's written several books, and he writes them in fables. So they're a little bit more like a David Baldacci book, at least at the beginning, till he gets to try to tell you the lesson. But this is called The Working Genius. This is his latest book. Kristen can tell you way more about this than I can, but it's a great read, and it tells you a lot about where you draw your joy in the work world and what sucks energy out of you in the work world. So that's what I'm currently reading, and a couple of other things to tell you about. I mentioned the Monday Morning Minute. You can find that on social media. And but the other thing that I wanted to mention, there's flyers up front for an event called Live to Lead. And Elizabeth has usually gotten a group of people together, and so has Stacy the last few years, and helped us with Live to Lead. Live to Lead is a national level leadership conference that we bring to the Woodlands, and it's going to be in February of 23. And we've got 5 scheduled national level speakers that will be on video, and then we have local level speakers combined with that. So if you're interested in self-growth in the area of leadership, and you're interested in hearing from some really fantastic national speakers, pick up a flyer for Live to Lead. And interestingly enough, Patrick Lencioni is one of the speakers this year. And he's going to be speaking on The Working Genius. And we are also going to have a live local component to that day that is about the Working Genius. So if you're interested in that, pick something up about Live to Lead. And I do want to recognize and thank my amazing executive assistant, TJ, who's in the back. She can tell you anything about Live to Lead because she really puts it together entirely. Jeff and I are the faces and partners of that, but TJ does all the work. And it's the same way with Light the Night and Corks for a Cure and just about anything else I do. So thank you, TJ. If you have any questions about sponsorship opportunities for Live to Lead, check with TJ. So, in closing, I just say, embrace who your life has made you. Don't get too hung up on who you're not. We think too much about who we're not, or why we're not like the person that lives over there, or does something different than we do, or makes more money than we do, or looks different than we do, or acts happier than we do. That doesn't matter. What they're doing is their thing. Let them be them. Embrace who you are, the stories and the life experiences that have gotten you to where you are and who you are, and do something with those things. Take them and do something with them. Teach somebody, show somebody, share somebody. Tell a story. Don't let failures and disappointments define you. If you do that, that's like a down the hill spiral. And it can get ugly. I mean, that leads to depression. Don't let those things define you. We've got better things to define ourselves. If nothing else, there are lessons that come out of those things. So, leaving that to say, be humble, have perspective, always grow, and invest ×3 in others and in yourself and in the community. Thank you all very much.